Megan Vann held her breath. She was crafting a delicate chocolate butterfly to adorn her cake. Decorating desserts was the confectioner's favourite part. She poured her heart into it. Megan worked with jeweller-like precision, transforming the cake into a culinary masterpiece. "Megan!" The sharp, impatient voice of her husband rang out from the bedroom. "Megan!" The sudden shout startled Megan, causing her hand to twitch. The chocolate decoration cracked, and the butterfly lost a wing. "Damn," she muttered, frowning. Setting aside the ruined figurine, she called back, "What is it?" "I'm starving," her spouse yelled. "When's dinner? You're making cakes again. Think about my stomach, not someone else's." Megan closed her eyes and took a deep breath, slowly counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Well, Megan!" The man's voice pierced her thoughts again. "Where's the food? I want lasagna or fettuccine. No, better lasagna. Megan, do you hear me?" Sighing, Megan stored the remaining decorations in the refrigerator, planning to return to the cake later. She knew her husband wouldn't leave her in peace. Lately, the phrase, "all men are like children," kept recurring in Megan's mind. After all, Jack, her husband, behaved like a capricious toddler. Judging by his antics, Jack had recently turned 2, at most. "Megan!" Jack wailed again. "I'm coming!" she shouted back, trying to mask her irritation. In truth, Megan felt ashamed of her thoughts and anger. Her husband wasn't merely being difficult. He genuinely couldn't walk. Megan vividly remembered that terrible day and the phone call that divided her life into before and after. She had been baking a honey cake to order when the phone rang. Seeing an unfamiliar number, Megan assumed it was a customer, so she answered and put it on speaker to continue working. "Hello," Megan said cheerfully, opening the oven to retrieve a golden brown cake layer. "Megan Vann?" A man's voice came through, introducing himself. "Police Sergeant Brian Gardner." Megan snorted, initially assuming it was another scammer. She thought he'd probably start talking about loans or bank fraud, but she couldn't dismiss the caller because she had already donned oven mitts and grabbed the hot baking pan. "I'm calling to inform you that your spouse Jack has been in a traffic accident. He's been taken to the city hospital." Megan's world spun. She snapped out of her shock when the baking tray crashed to the floor, shattering the cake. The policeman continued speaking, but the woman barely registered his words. Megan vaguely recalled grabbing the phone and asking for the hospital address to be repeated. She scribbled it with trembling fingers on a scrap of paper, then, hastily turning off the oven, rushed to the medical centre. At the hospital, she learned the horrifying details that seemed like a scene from the movie Final Destination. Jack had been driving on the highway behind a logging truck. The trailer had detached and veered into oncoming traffic, scattering logs along the way. Jack's car struck the scattered logs and overturned, then collided with the trailer. When Megan saw photos from the accident scene, she couldn't suppress a terrified scream. The husband's car was reduced to a heap of metal. The ambulance took the victim away in an unconscious state. Until Megan saw the doctor, she involuntarily imagined the worst. However, by some miracle, Jack escaped with only internal bruises and several fractures. "The main thing is that the head is intact," the surgeon tried to joke, touching the woman's shoulder. "The rest we've already patched up." Megan's heart sank, and tears sprang from her eyes, this time from relief. She had no idea that there were still difficulties ahead. Jack was discharged from the hospital after 3 weeks. He was in a cast and wheelchair bound, but most importantly, alive. "I'm confident he'll walk on his own, even without crutches, but I can't give 100% guarantee yet." the doctor said as he saw the patient off. "For now, he should move as little as possible." Megan nodded, relieved to have her spouse back. However, as they say, the good times didn't last long. Jack's character deteriorated terribly. Aggression, resentment, temper and capriciousness awakened in him. Jack seemed especially depressed by the fact that Megan officially became the head of the family, although she had been carrying everything on her shoulders before. The fact was that Jack couldn't return to work, receiving only meagre disability payments. Fortunately, a year before the accident, Megan had started baking cakes. She had stumbled upon a popular blogger on the internet who baked cakes and cupcakes to order, earning good money. Megan thought, "Why can't I do that?" At first, Megan combined baking with her main job as a schoolteacher. However, she soon left the school because she simply couldn't take it anymore. She was emotionally burned out, exhausted from the workload, buried in paperwork, and the salary was pitiful. Megan's decision wasn't appreciated by her mother-in-law or her husband. They both tried to guide Megan back to the right path. "Being a teacher is a noble profession. Can't you handle it?" Jack's mother grumbled. "And you need an official salary. Otherwise, how will you get a pension?" "If I stay in school, I won't live to see my pension," Megan joked grimly. She didn't listen to her mother-in-law's advice. Only her best friend Daphne supported her new hobby, and it was Daphne who first bought Megan's chocolate cake, insisting on full payment. Then she spread the word and helped her friend create a social media page. Soon, Megan had so many orders that even her mother-in-law fell silent. Eventually, Megan and Jack were able to take out a mortgage and move out of their rented accommodation. It was paid mainly by Megan. Jack earned a not-too-good salary, but he covered only the utilities. The rest of his earned money he spent on himself, especially on computer games, which Megan couldn't understand. However, the woman was so passionate about her business and personal growth that she failed to notice the red flags in their relationship. Now that Jack was completely in a cast, only Megan's cakes provided for them. However, work became more challenging every week as Jack began to demand all of his wife's attention. Megan tolerated her husband's whims, understanding how difficult it was for him. She looked after him as if he were a child. Jack, however, did not appreciate it. He would become angry if his spouse sought a brief distraction by meeting a friend or leaving the house on business. "You want to leave me alone?" He looked at her reproachfully like a helpless puppy. "Don't you remember what happened last time?" And last time had been a real disaster, by Jack and his mother's standards. Megan, deciding she'd go crazy if she didn't get some air, had gone to the candy store. She didn't make it as she received a call from her husband. "I'm bleeding! There's blood everywhere!" he yelled into the phone. A pale Megan turned the car around and rushed back home. Then she saw her husband sucking his finger. There was a shallow cut on it. It turned out that the man had wanted a sandwich, but had failed in his attempt. "That's it?" Megan was stunned. She couldn't bite her tongue. Jack looked at her resentfully, as if Megan had personally pulled out a machete and slashed him. She had to generously pour hydrogen peroxide on the finger of the sufferer, blow on the cut, and then wrap it with several layers of bandages so that the child calmed down. Daphne, hearing such news, whistled. "You burned your hand with caramel this summer, but finished the wedding cake, and he threw a tantrum because of a scratch. You've gotten him used to the sweet life." Megan only sighed, and then listened to the reproaches of her mother-in-law, who claimed that Megan, a careless fool, had left her husband alone. "You know, I didn't think that a 30-year-old man couldn't be trusted with a knife and sausage," Megan finally retorted. However, now, when the man whined that he was again abandoned to his fate, Megan sighed, pulled off her jacket and called Daphne to say that she wouldn't come. She devoted another evening to taking care of the discharged hospital ward. It seemed to worsen. The expression on his face became more miserable, and he took more pills. Megan's mother-in-law visited them often. Taking advantage of the moment, Jack's mother conducted an audit of the hostess's fridge, criticising her for cooking an insufficient number of dishes. When she noticed that Megan was freezing ready-made dishes so that she wouldn't have to waste time on cooking later, she grabbed her head. "My Jack needs good nutrition to get on his feet. And what? Are there just cakes in your refrigerator?" Megan clenched her teeth and swallowed the words that these cakes were the only source of income for their family. A month passed, followed by a second. The man was able to move around the house on his own, but the cast had not been removed. Problems with Jack only increased. Jack refused to warm his own food, preferring to shout throughout the apartment that he was hungry. He was impatient and waited for Megan to drop everything and run to feed him. At least he didn't insist on spoon-feeding him. Once Megan, unable to stand it, threw it in her husband's face. "I've prepared everything and put it in containers. Can't you go and warm it up?" Jack then took great offence. "You don't care about me," he grumbled, shaming his spouse. "If you were sick, I wouldn't leave your bedside." Megan mentally scoffed, remembering her operation. The man hadn't even bothered to pick her up after the hospital, telling her to take a cab. In the end, Daphne took care of her friend. She also prepared food in advance so that her friend could rest, following the doctor's instructions. But even then, Jack still demanded attention and a hot dinner for a man tired from work. And now, on top of everything, Jack started leaving a mess everywhere. He constantly scattered crumbs around the house and threw things wherever he pleased. Megan found wet towels, dirty laundry, napkins and chip packages all over the house. She tried to hint that her husband might benefit from making an extra trip to the trash can. However, he didn't listen. Jack spent all day watching TV or playing online games with his friends. 3 months after the accident, the man seemed to feel better, yet he still relied heavily on his wife. Despite his poor condition and the cast on his leg, Jack didn't miss the chance to meet his friends at the summer house for Frankie's birthday, Jack's best friend. The man could not miss such an event. Megan let him go willingly, feeling only relief. She spent a peaceful weekend. She met with Daphne and went shopping, for the first time in months, spending time and money on herself rather than her husband's whims. On Sunday evening, friends returned Jack, literally carrying the drunken man into the apartment. "Accept the package, hostess," laughed the equally drunk birthday boy. Jack fell asleep immediately. Megan went to the kitchen to finish a late-night order, a set of trifles she had promised to deliver to the customer's office herself. Unfortunately, things weren't going smoothly. The cream had separated, and the first cake hadn't risen. The determined confectioner stayed in the kitchen to perfect the layered desserts in glasses. When Megan finished and, tired but satisfied with the result, got ready for bed, dawn was already breaking. It seemed her head had barely touched the pillow when the phone demanded she get up. Jack, who had slept well but was now hung over, made the same demand. "Megan, Megan," he moaned gravely, barely opening his swollen eyes. "I need some water and aspirin, quickly." Only after getting water and a tablet did the man demand breakfast. "My stomach's grumbling. What delicious thing do we have today?" Megan glanced at her watch. "Listen, I promised the customer I'd bring desserts to the office by the start of the workday," she said. "He's some company head who wants to treat his colleagues. I think it's their company's birthday or something. Why don't you make your own breakfast? Warm up the pasta I cooked for dinner last night." Jack frowned and breathed heavily. "What? Pasta for breakfast? I haven't been home for 3 days, and this is how you greet me, running off at once. I see you didn't miss me. It's easier for you without me, isn't it? Am I a burden to you?" He began to grumble. Megan barely restrained herself from rolling her eyes. "Calm down, Jack. I'm not going for a walk. I'm going to work." "Oh, yes, of course. You're the breadwinner. You carry everything on your fragile shoulders. And I'm just an invalid roommate you can ignore." Jack started his familiar refrain again. Realizing that arguing with her husband would only waste time and energy, Megan hastily cooked him an omelette. The man, picking at it, muttered, "Something else next time. Maybe a spicy soup." Megan ignored him this time. She wasn't about to offer a multi-course breakfast like a hotel. After dressing hastily and hearing her husband accuse her of wearing makeup to attract other men, Megan fled the apartment. Only after driving a couple of blocks did she realize she'd forgotten the most important thing: a box with desserts left in the refrigerator. Stopped at a traffic light, Megan blurted out, "My head's not working at all from lack of sleep. Or maybe it's not just that." The woman jabbed at the steering wheel in frustration. Soon other drivers started honking behind her, hinting that the light wouldn't get greener, and it was time to go. Sighing, Megan turned around and drove back. But in the apartment, Megan heard the familiar sounds of gunfire and swearing. Nothing criminal, of course. Her husband was just fighting someone online again. Megan slipped into the kitchen past his room, the door to which was open. She didn't want to be seen by him. The woman took the box of desserts and hurried back. However, she stopped like a stump. Megan noticed 2 desserts were missing. Her heart leapt to her throat, her cheeks flushing. She was about to burst into her husband's room and demand an explanation when she heard his smug voice, interrupted by unpleasant chewing. "Frankie, shall we repeat the party this weekend? Just call Sarah. Next time, I'll definitely put her to bed. Have you seen what a babe she is?" Megan froze and listened. Through the gap between the door and wall, she could see the back of her husband, sitting at the computer wearing large headphones. Unaware of Megan's return, he was chatting with his best friend, vividly discussing their weekend fun while devouring the cakes Megan had made earlier. Megan couldn't hear Frankie's responses, but her husband's words rang out clearly, stinging her cheeks and sobering her up. "I haven't slept with Megan since the accident, all under the guise of being an invalid, though we started abstaining earlier after her operation. Something was removed from her female parts, and she's always busy, spinning around, doing things, her eyes flashing. No, everything suits me fine." Unable to contain her emotions, Megan entered the room. But Jack didn't even flinch. He continued bragging, smiling and clicking his computer mouse. "The cast came off a month ago. I arranged with a doctor I know to make a second one. I put it on when my wife's around. Megan hasn't noticed a thing." He laughed and bent to scratch his leg, which, surprise, surprise, had no cast. "Why should I be ashamed? My life's become like in royal family. I don't want to return to the old routine. I'm satisfied with everything. And if we can still party on weekends, it's not just life, it's paradise. And also—" Megan stopped listening to whatever else Jack planned to tell his friend. She swung the box of dessert leftovers at her husband's head. The projectile hit its mark, making the man twitch and squeal like a piglet. He yanked off his headphones, spinning sharply in his computer chair. Jack's face drained of colour, his expression terrified. Megan, red as a poppy, clenched her fists and shook with anger. Hot tears choked her. "How could you? You brute!" she shouted. "Megan, listen, it's not what you think," Jack protested. "What is it then?" Megan gasped with indignation. "Go on. I'm ready to hear your miraculous story. Maybe Jesus came to you and touched your foot, saying, 'Rise and walk.' How else can you explain being without a cast? And Sarah, you're a real ladies' man." "Megan, calm down," the man suddenly interrupted, springing to his feet. "Think about it. What can I do? You're not sleeping with me. Besides, how am I supposed to feel like a man around you if you've been bathing me for 2 months?" "Exactly," the wife shouted back. "You've got it made, Jack. I'm running around here like a servant for a perfectly healthy man, and you're having fun, and you've even made me the guilty one. I didn't go to bed with you because I wasn't sleeping at all, working hard to pay the mortgage." "Megan, let's calm down," Jack babbled, taking a step toward her. The woman recoiled as if from fire. "To hell with you. I don't want to see you again." With that, Megan stormed out of the apartment. Jack didn't chase after her. In her car, Megan, sobbing, called the customer to admit the desserts wouldn't be ready. Hello, I've let you down terribly," she choked out. "I can make you a free cake and refund your money, of course." Hearing her distress, the man grew concerned. "Do you need help?" he asked. "Only if you're a lawyer," Megan sobbed. Silence hung on the line before the customer spoke. "Actually, I am a lawyer." An hour later, Megan sat in Hector Molina's office, now as the client. Hector turned out to be a consummate professional. Soon, Megan and Jack divorced, with Megan keeping the apartment she'd been paying the mortgage on. Fortunately, the mortgage was in her mother's name, as her mother-in-law had refused to take responsibility, a decision she later regretted. Jack moved back in with his mother, and as Daphne imagined, they lived in harmony while gossiping about Megan. However, Megan couldn't care less about their fate. Leaving the courtroom, she took her first, deep, unencumbered breath in recent memory. Megan began living on her own terms, baking cakes and cupcakes, sleeping soundly at night, and working on decor without interruptions. She started going out with her friend, allowing herself to laugh loudly and genuinely. Frequenting cafes and bars, she began dressing up again and soon blossomed. Later, Megan baked an enormous cake and many truffles. She brought this bounty to Hector's law office. "I'd like to thank you, to return you my debt," she said, blushing. "Thank you for being so understanding back then." The lawyer's colleagues welcomed the pastry chef enthusiastically. Work ground to a halt as the office filled with the aroma of coffee and tea. After tasting the dessert, Hector looked at Megan and said, "I'm a straightforward person, so I'll tell you directly. I like you. I didn't say anything earlier because you are my client, and that would have been highly unprofessional. But you can't fight your heart. Tell me, is it too soon to ask you out? It's only been a short while since your divorce." Megan blushed and nodded at the cake. "Did the dessert make such an impression on you?" she asked coyly. "Well, they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach," Hector replied with a smile. Megan laughed and accepted the invitation. One date led to a second, then a third. Soon, Hector invited Megan to move in, and eventually they married. When Megan caught the flu, Hector doted on her. He always treated her like a delicate flower and never belittled her hard work. On the contrary, he was proud of her. A year later, they welcomed their son, and their happiness was complete.